a good place to start is always with an understanding of what we mean by advocacy. And, clearly advocacy can be quite an umbrella term to describe a lot of different action for advancing change. For the purposes of today's session, we're using uh, advocacy as the way that our advocacy team at Partners in Health thinks about this. And that really refers to developing and executing strategies to build and leverage power to change specific policies and ultimately conditions that improve people's lives. It's worth noting that all advocacy is based on power relationships, and that is the influence created by this relationship between interests and resources, and that leveraging power ultimately takes two forms, and we refer to these two forms as power with and power over. And to elaborate a little bit more about what we mean by both of these terms, power with is really referring to the times when it is possible to create change through existing power relations by using an inside strategy. So we can think of power with as being the inside game. And that this really is about bringing information to decision makers, whether it be government officials or legislators, to make changes. And so this is um, reflected in the approach of government accompaniment, which is really centered on exercising power with by providing this knowledge and recommendations to bring about specific change. All effective advocacy uses this power with or inside approach to some degree. And then in thinking about power over, there are many times when power relations need to be altered by an outside strategy. And that often means building enough pressure on specific individuals, often within very powerful institutions or corporations, to get them to take action that they initially didn't want to take or were opposed to taking. So exercising power over really means making it much more costly for someone who is not acting. Makes it more costly than them not to act than it would be for them to take your advice, ultimately. So, that's kind of a theoretical distinction between these two forms of power. And a really key question then is, so when do we use power with and when do we use power over? And when developing an advocacy strategy, there are really three key questions you want to have in mind when doing this. And so the first one we want to ask, and ask repeatedly, is what are the social rules causing unnecessary suffering for this specific issue? So, for example, if we take the case of multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, one of the reasons that people weren't getting treatment up until the 2000s was because the World Health Organization told countries, as a rule, not to deliver the treatment. And in the case of HIV treatment access, between 1997 and 2007, close to 15 million people died in Africa for want of effective treatment, purely due to the artificial scarcity of antiretrovirals. And this was caused by international patent rules that prevented the generic production of antiretrovirals. So you can see how uh, this is really unnecessary suffering um, caused by these structures of violence, um, and then that leads us really to the next question, which is, so who has the power to change these rules? And when thinking about this question, we're always thinking about um, really the primary targets of advocacy. And so a target is always a specific individual. So it would never just be an institution, but a specific individual inside that institution. And that individual has the power to give us what we want, to change these rules such that, for example, um, uh, there could be the generic production of antiretrovirals in the example provided. The third question then really is to ask, so why aren't these people with power taking action? And it's really always one of two reasons. Either it's um, out of ignorance or it's opposition to our position. So it's either they don't have understanding of the problem and the solution to it, but if we give them that proper understanding, they can take action, which is very much the approach of the government accompaniment strategy, and that inside strategy. Oftentimes, um, they do understand the problem and the solution, but they actually don't want to do anything about it. And so the answer to this question 3, really determines whether you need to prioritize exercising a power with or power over strategy. Ultimately, any advocacy campaign will use both strategies usually, but it's the dance between this inside and outside strategy um, where the action happens. Trying to get specific individuals to take action.